Welcome back, everyone. Episode 19 of the review. We made it to another Friday. Of course, we only do episodes on Mondays and Fridays, so did we really make it to a Friday, or did we kind of coast our way through the week to get here? The world will never know. Brendon Hodges here on the review, CBB Review's flagship podcast, moving into our postseason, per se. I have a couple of writers set to join me in just a moment, including the one and only, the rival, my arch nemesis, and my classmate, Mat Mlodzinski. Steve Kirck, the resident Kentucky fan of CBB Review, will also join us, and he'll have a little fun today if he can beat Matt in this quiz. A lot of chances for points in today's three-point play. Not doing any regular season game picks because we're picking conference tournaments from now on. Conference tournament play just started last night. I didn't even realize it was going to start last night until I was doing my final bit of prep, putting together really bad, renditions of conference tournament brackets, because we're previewing three of those today. One, the Horizon League started last night. I don't think any of the games were that close, if I'm being honest with you, but we'll cover that in just a minute. For now, though, let's get to my starting five. And, there are times when conference tournaments are just as exciting, if not more exciting, than the big dance itself. And there's a reason they call it March Madness, because the conference tournaments start, albeit in late February, like the last 2 days, and early March. And that's where most of the madness takes place, because you have shakeups in regards to conference seeding, but also NCAA tournament seeding, because for example, Gonzaga actually plays in the West Coast Conference Tournament this year and doesn't opt out, and they get beat in the first round. Are they still on the one line? Probably not, because they lost to somebody like St. Mary's, who's not as good this year. You could say the same thing for Baylor or any of the top teams in any of the Power 6, Power 7 conferences. And then you get to the NCAA tournament, which is where all the major upsets happen, because you're not watching a team from the America East play in their tournament. Shout out UMBC over Virginia a couple years ago. Or say a team like a Bradley taking Michigan State down to the wire, Middle Tennessee taking Michigan State down a couple years ago, the Stanfords, the Harvards, all of those schools that take down the big timers. You don't really watch those teams in their conference tournaments as much as you do in the NCAA tournament. And I have my top 5 moments from conference tournaments here, and you'll see a trend that they're all from big tournaments, which just kind of proves my point that I don't really watch the mid-major conference tournaments, at least up until this point. But I do have my top 5 moments from conference tournaments, starting with number 5 back in 2010. And I was talking to a couple of my other classmates that don't participate in this website, this podcast about it. And they mentioned Evan Turner in 2010 with Ohio State playing against Michigan. Now, obviously, Michigan, Ohio State, they hate each other. And we love it when schools hate each other because it makes for awesome stories, awesome games. But I literally copied and pasted this description of this game because it was just so good. And this game provided the perfect example of how not to play late game defense, because Michigan, for whatever reason, didn't put any pressure on the inbounds pass at the end of the game and let a guy like Evan Turner take 2 dribbles and take a half court, probably farther than that. I didn't get a chance to watch it today. Shot from that distance, he nails it, and the Buckeyes win in the Big Ten quarterfinals. A lot of these games are going to take place in the quarterfinals in terms of the moments we're talking about as well, which is odd because you'd expect the final to be the most exciting game, but it's 2 games before that. Next up, though, the year after that, and UConn is the subject of a couple, actually 3 straight of these moments that I have. The first one being in 2011, if you remember Cardiac Kemba. You know the step backs like Isaiah Thomas in the Pac-12 tournament, but Kemba Walker is he is the prohibitive guy to look to when you think of a step back jumper. He switches onto a big man, steps back, nails it, beats Pitt, and it sparks UConn's national title run that no one saw coming. And then ironically, 4 years later, a similar thing happens, but instead of Kemba Walker, it's Ryan Boatwright, Shabazz Napier, and that crew. I believe Niels Giffey was on both of those teams. So shout out Germany. You have a 2-time national champion who no one really knows what happened to him. At least I don't. Maybe I'll ask the 2 guys when they get in here. Next up, going back to UConn again, this time in 2016 in the American Tournament quarterfinals again, playing Cincinnati this time. Now, they were toe-to-toe all night, Bearcats and Huskies, back and forth, back and forth. Goes into 3 overtimes. In the third overtime, guy coming off the bench, Kevin Johnson, drains a 3, 0.8 to go. You're thinking, UConn's done. Like, their record isn't good enough at this point to where they're a lock to get into the tournament as a at-large bid, and they have to win this game. And in a similar fashion, Cincinnati has a better resume, but it'd be nice if they won this game for their fans. Enter a guy named Jalen Adams, who, again, apparently teams don't like putting pressure on the ball with less than a second left because they don't think anything bad's going to happen. Ball sits out of bounds for like 3 seconds. They inbound Jalen Adams, three-quarter court, banks it in. Fourth overtime, and UConn goes on to win that game. So that's number 3. Mat Mlodzinski, when he enters, is going to like that I mentioned this one because we've talked about watching this game, and we just haven't gotten around to it with all of our Syracuse graduate friends. 2009 Big East Tournament. Again, UConn in the middle of the Hashim Thabit era, which ended shortly thereafter with his lackluster NBA career. Against Syracuse, Eric Devendorf thinks he hits a game-winning 3 in regulation. Didn't hit a game-winning 3 in regulation because it was on his fingertips. Should have trimmed him, as Bill Raftery said. Goes into overtime. Syracuse doesn't lead in the overtime. Second overtime, Syracuse doesn't lead in the second overtime. Third overtime, Syracuse still doesn't lead in the third overtime. Same story through the fourth and fifth overtimes. You have walk-ons in the game that like shouldn't be playing. A UConn walk-on like comes in and hits a jumper from the free throw line. A ridiculous game. And I believe Jay Billis, who was an analyst of that game, said that First Take was coming up next because the game ended at like 2 a.m. Eastern time. And First Take was on, I think, at like 9 or 10 the next morning. He was going to have to be on it to talk about the Big East Tournament. And it ended up being Syracuse wasn't nearly as gassed as UConn winning that game in 6 overtimes. Johnny Flynn was remarkable. Paul Harris, not as remarkable, but whatever. Anyway, and then number 1, and Steve Kirck will hate the fact that I have this in here. Subject of the ESPN documentary series SEC Storied, Miracle 3, 2008 SEC tournament in Atlanta. The Georgia Dome, rocked by a tornado after Mikhail Riley from Alabama hits a 3 to send it to overtime. He doesn't do that. A lot of people die from a tornado. They pause the game for a second, play the overtime. I believe Alabama ends up losing that game. I haven't seen it in a long time. Georgia and Kentucky are supposed to play later that night. That game gets postponed to the next day. Why is that a problem, you ask? Because the winner of that game will have to play another game that night. Everybody thinks it's going to be Kentucky, and then some guy named Zach Swansea steps off the bench and takes an impossible shot that everyone on the bench is screaming no at, and drills it. Georgia beats Kentucky. They go on to win the next 2 games, and as like a 12 and 18, like lowest seed in the SEC tournament, win it all, go to the tournament. And I believe they got bounced in the first round anyway. So it was a great story, though. So those are my top 5 conference tournament moments. That was my starting 5. And now we'll welcome in our 2 writers, Mat Mlodzinski, Steve Kirck, as we're here on a Friday. And guys, I would ask you for your top 5 moments, but it would take too long. And we don't have that kind of time today. But we are talking about conferences that we don't usually talk about. So I'd like to welcome for their debut, I believe it's their debut on the review, the Horizon League. First conference tournament we're previewing today, and it's really not a preview because the first round happened last night. So we're really looking at the second round action right now. The 3 favorites in the tournament are Cleveland State, Northern Kentucky, Wright State. You guys have those on your rundown. They're underlined. You see their opponents there. For some reason, everybody doesn't like Oakland, and they're the 3 seed. So sorry, Oakland, I guess. But for the first time ever on the review, the revived version, we're going to be previewing conference tournaments. It's going to be great. So guys, we're just going to go ahead and start with thoughts on the favorites. And I realize that I don't know how much we're actually going to have on this because as Steve Kirck told me before this, he had to do a lot of research because he knew next to nothing about any of these teams. And as I said, I thought North Dakota State and South Dakota State were in the Horizon League when they were really in the Summit League. So that was a bit of a shell shock for me. But we'll start with Matt and then go to Steve. Matt, what are your thoughts on the favorites in this tournament, and who might be the most upset prone?
Awesome. And real quick too, Brendon, I really do appreciate those top 5 lists. I thought that was A1. I do want to mention one you might have left off. Another Syracuse game. Jerry McNamara, overrated in 2006, hit a buzzer beater against UConn that gave him their first lead of the game, hit a buzzer beater the next game, and then a pass to Eric Devendorf. 3 straight buzzer beater shots and assists gave Syracuse a Big East tournament that they probably wouldn't have gotten into the NCAA that year. But we had to shout out that for our Syracuse Orange.
I mean, you could also shout out Ariel Putterman, Wayne Selden, absolutely destroying whoever that guy was on Baylor in the Big 12 tournament, and then his uncle wearing a clock necklace. But let's focus on the Horizon League here, Matt, as we're looking at the horizon right now of conference play and NCAA tournament play. So the favorites and who is the most upset prone of them?
Yeah, to me, the favorite is actually the 2 seed. I have Wright State. I just think overall this year they've been the most dominant in the Horizon League. I understand that Cleveland State has that 1 seed, but Wright State just has a little bit more inside. Loudon Love is a big-time player. He's 6'8", 260 pounds. Not a lot of people in that Horizon League are going to be able to guard him. They haven't throughout the season. And when you look at tournament play, you can't mess around. Wright State's not going to get into the tournament unless they win the Horizon League. So they're going to pound it into Loudon Love and make sure that he goes to work. When we look at the most upset prone, that's kind of an interesting question. Gosh, I'd almost go with the number 1 seed Cleveland State because they have that number 1 on their back, but I don't believe that they're the best team in the Horizon. I'd even go as far to say that number 4 Northern Kentucky can beat them, and I would actually pick that game. I think they would beat Cleveland State if they do end up playing. Now, it is also just a weird form of a bracket. I posted that on the Twitter. Not the tradition. I mean, it's the traditional 12 teams. The top 4 get the buys, but the fact that they reseed every round is also something to keep an eye on. I don't know if that'll have an effect on anything, but it's definitely something to note.
I'll go back to 2 comments just on the top 5 that I wanted to mention. Then I'll get into this Horizon League matchup. But you were talking about aggressive and not playing the ball. I think Rick Pitino would like to have a redo in 1992 on not playing the ball in one game that is pretty epic in NCAA tournament history. And secondly, the 6 overtime situation where walk-ons are deciding March Madness game. I think you guys know I officiate high school and college basketball. One rule that I would love to see implemented is you get an extra timeout when you go to overtime as a team. I think you should get an extra foul if you go to overtime as well. Because 5 fouls were meant for 40 minutes. They weren't meant for 6 overtimes. I would put one caveat in there. If you foul out in regulation, you're done. If you get a 6th foul and you foul out in the first overtime, you're done. You cannot come back in a game, but I think you should get extra fouls like you get extra timeouts. That's just a little pet peeve of mine. Don't know if you guys agree or not, but moving on.
As a high school player that fouled out of every single game freshman year, I would have appreciated that. I would have really appreciated that because I tried to take charges all the time. And in freshman year, JV basketball, they don't like you taking charges. So I like the ingenuity there.
Getting back to the Horizon, I kind of agree with Matt. Wright State, they're the 3rd best rebounding team in the country. They average almost 43 rebounds per game. You know what that tells me? That means they play defense and they hit the offensive glass. And come March Madness, that is a recipe for success. In terms of dark horses, Detroit Mercy makes 11 threes a game. If you can hit that average in the postseason, you might be able to pull an upset or 2. And they get Northern Kentucky in the semifinals, and we'll see where it goes. But making threes can make up deficits or extend leads. And if you can make 11 or 12 a game, that might be tough to overcome in one 40-minute session of a playoff game.
Absolutely. Horizon League, very interesting. Already in their second round, as we mentioned, Purdue-Fort Wayne will be taking on Cleveland State. Detroit Mercy, that Steve's upset pick here, taking on Northern Kentucky, who Matt believes is actually the biggest favorite, I think he said, in this tournament. Then you have Oakland and Youngstown State, which I guess nobody wants to talk about because no one wants to talk about it, at least here. And then Wright State will be taking on Wisconsin, Milwaukee. A couple of the games that took place last night, Purdue-Fort Wayne winning in overtime, already upsetting Wisconsin Green Bay. That was big. But as I was looking through the records of a lot of these teams, they were all sub 500, except for those top 4 seeds. So definitely only a 1-bid league. And we'll discuss that later on in the game picks when we pick winners for these tournaments. So keep that in mind, guys. For now, though, we'll hit our first break, take a time out. Coming up next, we'll discuss, which conference tournament do we have? Well, first, we have the biggest stories in college hoops since we last saw you. And then we'll also be discussing, where did it go? I believe it's the Big South that we're talking about next. And again, another conference that I know little about. We'll see how much these guys know about it when we come back on the review. Back here on the review, B Block getting set to get underway here on a Friday afternoon at this point, actually. Mat Mlodzinski and Steve Kirck joining me. I'm Brendon Hodges. This is the review. We'll go ahead and hit the biggest stories from college hoops since we last saw you, starting with a big rise followed by a ridiculously, a lot bigger fall. And that is courtesy of the South Carolina Gamecocks men's basketball program. If you guys remember a couple of years ago, I believe that would have been Matt and I's freshman year, maybe sophomore year of college. South Carolina was in the Final Four. They were maybe the Elite Eight. They were playing, I think they played North Carolina for the right to play Gonzaga, or maybe it was the other way around. In that Final Four, gave them a run for their money. Well, I think we just figured out why that they were that good that year. Because they were placed on probation for 2 years by the NCAA for a former assistant coach accepting anywhere between $3,300, $5,800 in bribes from a sports agent. That decision by the NCAA put an end to South Carolina's role in college basketball corruption cases starting in 2017. Now, the Gamecocks actually avoided other serious penalties that you would expect for them to get, like a postseason ban in terms of what the NCAA would deem a level 1 infractions case. And South Carolina head coach Frank Martin wasn't named in any of the allegations, so I guess good for him, even though usually head coaches get a lot of the blame for this sort of thing. In a statement, Martin said that the University of South Carolina looks to move forward and that he is thankful to have that situation behind us. It's a quick rise and, like I said, an even quicker fall from the Gamecocks. I'm interested to see what SEC expert Steve Kirck has to say about it.
What was that again?
Just like what you think about the South Carolina's situation they got here. We got a lot of, despite the fact we're talking about mid-majors today, we have quite a bit of SEC stuff going on.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that they didn't get a postseason ban and how it will impact, the other schools that are, in a similar situation, in terms of rulings that the NCAA will come down, in the not too distant future. So it was interesting from that standpoint.
I'll ask Matt about this next topic and give you a little break, Steve. So Matt has talked to me a lot about how UConn has done without James Bouknight for long stretches this year. Well, now we'll get to see how Illinois deals with losing one of their stars for a significant period of time. Fifth-ranked Fighting Illini are going to be without star guard Ayo Dosunmu. He's out indefinitely after suffering a facial injury. That was announced yesterday. Now, he suffered the injury on Tuesday in a loss to Michigan State when he was fouled hard by Spartans freshman Mady Sissoko late in the game. Sissoko ended up being ejected after that hit, and Dosunmu did not leave the game. Now, Coach Brad Underwood didn't offer a specific timeline for Dosunmu's return, but said he wouldn't play against Nebraska yesterday, and he didn't. He's a Wooden Award candidate, averaging 21 points, 6.3 rebounds, 5.3 assists, and he's number 35 in ESPN's NBA draft ranking. So, Matt, how do you think an injury like this to Dosunmu affects Illinois' chances in the Big Ten?
Even further, and I'll give a timetable. He's going to be back for the Michigan game. I can tell you that with 110% certainty. If he's not back for that game, then it's a serious injury. I think it affects them totally. I still have them as my last 1 seed, believe it or not. I think, with Ohio State losing to Michigan State, I just can't trust Ohio State. Illinois is ahead of them in the net rankings, even though Ohio State beat them. And to me, they're a Final Four contender. I think they have the best duo in college basketball with Dosunmu and Kofi Cockburn. Without Dosunmu, it's totally over. I mean, they have other good players. They could probably win a game or two in the NCAA tournament. It'd be totally done. It'd be shot. And it'd also be tough to seed them because if he's really going to be out this long, and again, with a facial injury, I don't think that'd be the case. but it's just something to think about is where would you put Illinois? But if he's not back for that Michigan game, because that Michigan game would solidify where Illinois is in the tournament. I think they can beat Wisconsin tomorrow without DeSumno because Wisconsin plays such a defensive brand of basketball, and Illinois is so offensively talented. Even without DeSumno, I think they can score at least 70 on Wisconsin. But with him, they need him to beat Michigan. And if they beat Michigan, they're a lock for a 1 seed. If they considering how I think they're going to beat Wisconsin as well.
Yeah, if I was Illinois and if I was Coach Underwood, I think the concern I would have would be if we're talking a concussion situation that they're not really telling people about. If it's just a little bit of a facial injury and you got to get used to wearing a mask, and they want to let things, settle for a couple of days, that's one thing. But concussions, you never know how long that might take. And, does it rear its ugly head again once he comes back? So that would be the big concern I would have if I were Illinois moving forward.
Go ahead. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and skip to our final story of the day. The other one was North Carolina, laxing COVID protocols, so the ACC tournament will have fans. We've talked about that with the NCAA tournament. It's great. Congratulations, ACC. You're going to have fans at your tournament, and that's what makes it great. The last story we have, though, so the NCAA did announce, and Steve and I were talking about this beforehand, policies on what would happen if teams in the tournament had a COVID-related shutdown, per se. And they said they won't allow replacement teams after the tournament begins. There won't be any reseedings, no bracket changes once it's released on Selection Sunday. Replacement teams will only be introduced within 48 hours of the field's release, and potential at-large teams unable to meet medical protocols by the first game of the tournament must notify the selection committee on the Saturday night before the field is announced. Now, replacement teams would be determined in one of two ways, depending on whether the team that's withdrawing is a one-bid conference automatic qualifier or from a multi-bid league. Details still to come on that, but very interesting to see that. And Steve and I were talking about what if Baylor or Gonzaga is forced into a COVID shutdown, and Baylor especially, because the Big 12 has had all sorts of problems this year, just playing, whether it was COVID or due to weather. And those were really the biggest stories in college basketball this past week. We'll head back to the present now as we hit our second conference tournament preview, the Big South. Another weird bracket because they have that 3 games in the first round. 1 game was won by forfeit. Congratulations to Gardner-Webb. You move into the second round of the Big South tournament without having to play a game. But this tournament hasn't started yet. I believe it starts tomorrow. But we'll go through the same questions. Jens, your thoughts on the favorites, any dark horses, and which team has the most potential to be upset? We'll start with Steve this time and then go to Matt.
Yeah, I think Winthrop is, they're certainly a team to beat. It's probably their tournament to lose. They went 17-1 in the regular season. Their only loss was by 2 points. So, they're 3 points away from running the table, which actually might have put a little bit more pressure on them to win this. So that one loss may benefit them in the long run. The only thing I would worry about a little bit is they haven't played since February 19th. So I think their semifinals are this Monday or Tuesday. So you're looking at, almost a 2-week, I'm not going to say pause because it wasn't COVID related, but, 2-week gap between games. So are you a little bit rusty early coming off playing an opponent who won a game on Saturday? That would be my only concern. But I certainly think this is Winthrop's tournament to lose. And as far as the dark horse, I would probably say UNC Asheville because they were the one team to beat Winthrop, and it was by 2 points, during the season. So Winthrop's tournament to lose. They get to host throughout. They were 8-1 at home. So I would expect Pat Kelsey's team to cut down the nets, but it's March Madness and anything can happen.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you almost on everything you said. Wichita State, Winthrop right now, I have as an 11 seed. That's kind of an unpopular opinion by some, but I just look at it. I don't care what conference you're in. If you're going 20, if you're only going 1 loss into your conference tournament, you've got to be above that 12 seed threshold. Now, that can change. And when you look at Winthrop, I think they have offensive talent. They have one of the better in Chandler Vaudrin. He's a guy that can put the ball in the basket. But really just dishes out the ball great, and he rebounds, and he does that, all 3 of the big stats right there for Winthrop. I'd agree. UNC Asheville, just the fact that they beat Winthrop, they know that they can hold that over them. So that's a little bit testy, especially since they're the 4 seed, so they could even meet them in the semis. The other 2 names I'll throw out there real quick are Campbell. They have 2 scorers that average above 14.5 a game. The Big South really isn't known for offense and scoring. So I think, they're a team that might be able to put some points up if they meet with Winthrop. But Radford, they're not having a great season. I wouldn't pick Radford to beat Winthrop. And I say that meaning that, they're a 2 seed, but they're really not impressing many teams in the Big South. But Radford's a team and a program that's been there, and they've earned this bid a couple of the years recently. So I just think that it's a program that kind of knows how to win this tournament. I don't think they will, but it's just food for thought.
Again, anything can happen in March, though. We've seen Radford in the tournament plenty of times before, and all they need to do is get to the semis and beat Winthrop, because that seems to be your guys' favorite for this tournament. We'll take our second break. When we come back, Matt's least favorite thing to do, the 3-point play. It'll be Steve's favorite thing to do today. And we'll also cover our third and final preview for a conference tournament featuring, a conference I think we all need to be paying a little more attention to given recent history. All that coming up next on The Review. Back on The Review, C Block, getting set to get underway here on a Friday. Steve Kirck and Mat Mlodzinski joining me on this Friday edition of The Review, first conference tournament preview day. We'll have plenty of these coming up. We'll tease the next couple conferences towards the end of this episode. Going to move quickly here, though, and there's one conference, especially a mid-major conference, that I think everybody needs to pay attention to a little bit more, and that's the America East. And it's not just because of UMBC, but also because of those Catamounts up in Vermont. Got an old football teammate who's a big UVM fan. And Matt here is not a big UVM fan, considering recent Syracuse history as well. TJ Sorensen and Gus Johnson on the call on CBS. Oh, that was wonderful. Maybe not for you, but for the impartial viewer. We'll move on, though, to the America East, and all you have to do is ask Sam Bass's Virginia Cavaliers to know anything about this conference. Same questions, guys. Favorites, obviously, UMBC and Vermont. They're perennial favorites in this conference, and it seems like every other year it's just one or the other that's going to be in the tournament. New Hampshire, though, has a very interesting situation. They have a pod that they are playing in, I guess, per se. They play the winner of Massachusetts, Lowell, and Stony Brook. And then the other 2 games play right into the next quarterfinal game. So your thoughts on the 2 favorites in this conference, dark horses, and let's just go with which one of the 2 favorites has the most potential to be upset. We'll start with Matt this time, then go to Steve.
Yeah, Vermont and UMBC I've actually gone back and forth with. Vermont at the beginning of the season I thought would be one of the better mid-major teams in the country, and with COVID-related instances and non-COVID-related instances, they've struggled. I think the departure of Anthony Lamb has really hurt them. Steph Smith and Ryan Davis have definitely been good, and it's a team that I think could still, if they get a 14 seed in the tournament, I don't think any 3 seed would want to see them. Even if they were as low as a 15, I think they'd be a really tough team to be outed. UMBC, on the other hand, I think they can certainly win this tournament. They're more than talented enough, but I don't think they'd pose as much of a threat in the NCAA tournament. But they split with Vermont, so that they can beat Vermont. The team that I'll throw out there is my hometown Hartford Hawks, and they're fourth in the conference. They went 8-6 overall. But I think the thing for them that's helping them is, in the non-conference, they only lost by 12 at Connecticut in the first game of the year. And they played Villanova after that. So they have 2 games against really, really good teams in their pocket. And then in conference play, they split 2 games at UMBC. Both were at UMBC. They won the first one. They lost the second one by just 8 points. And the Vermont game got canceled. So here's a team that's beaten UMBC once, and Vermont hasn't seen them. So that could be tough if Vermont has to prepare for a team who's top 4 in the conference, and they haven't seen them in the regular season.
Yeah, I agree with that totally, man. I mean, this is a tournament that really any team can win. There was only 2 games that separated first and fifth place in the standings. Vermont, ironically, only played 14 games this year, and they were all in conference. So, they didn't play any non-conference games, to toughen them up like a University of Hartford did. Vermont does have the league's best player, though, in Kevin Roberson, second in the country in player efficiency rating to one only Luke Garza. So, he's probably the best player in the conference, and a lot of times the best player in the conference can lead his team to a championship and a berth. And the other thing I'll say is, whoever they play in the first round, whoever gets in, especially if it's Vermont or UMBC, that is not a team to be taken lightly in that first round matchup. And as Matt mentioned, they split a pair during the regular season, Vermont and UMBC. I think Hartford and New Hampshire are going to have their say, but we'd really like to see a winner-take-all game 3 in a championship game with the top 2 seeds in this conference.
Here at CBB Review, we like rubber matches. If you haven't figured that out yet, I don't know what you've been doing all year. We'll move on, though, and it's my favorite segment, guys. And I actually have 2 people here to compete in it. Now, I've sweetened the pot a little bit today, and I sort of tried to help Matt out last week or on Monday. He doesn't think I did, but I really did. Seton Hall trivia, like it's you went there. You should know stuff from there. Today I've helped out Steve a little bit because, we're rolling with the secondary rules today. It's one question, a listing question. And I have all the rules laid out, and I will explain them, so don't cut me off like you did on Monday, Matt. Today's theme, though, sticking with the conference tournament theme, this one hasn't started yet, but it's going to be the SEC tournament. And it's interesting because today we're talking about the number of championships that every school in the SEC has, from most to least. Now, there are 14 schools in the SEC, and it breaks down like this. You get 3 to 5, you get a point. You get 6 to 8, you get 2, 9 to 13, you get 3, you get all 14, you get 4 points. But here's the catch. A couple of these teams are tied in terms of numbers of titles. I'll tell you when we get to that point in the list and I'll tell you how many titles each of these teams has. I'd like you to write them down on a sheet of paper and put them up at the same time when we get to each team. And depending on how many you get right is how many points you get. And then there's also a small bonus at the end for both. Now, the other catch with the teams tied, you have to put them in the order of recent title. So let's say Team A's last title was in 2012. Team B's last title was in 2011. You put Team A first, Team B second. Matt looks like he's going to get some paper. And when he gets back, we'll just go one at a time. We're going to make this a note card. Okay. It's like an ID-shaped piece of paper. This should be interesting. All right, so the first school on the list, we're just going to go straight down from top to bottom. The first school on the list has 31 SEC tournament titles.
And we need to say when the last time they won.
No, you just need to say who it is. I'll tell you when the teams are tied. When the teams are tied with titles, you'll have to put them in the order of most recent title.
31 SEC tournament titles.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen, go ahead and put your cards up. Yeah, that was pretty. I can't see where it is, Steve. Is it like lower on the sheet? Or was it that? Oh, is that? Oh, yeah, there you go. Thank you. I was like, is that like @ sign at the top? What? No,
that's number 18. That's page 18 on the rundown.
That is correct. Yes. I am shocked you printed out the entire rundown. I just go like the pages that I need to do, or I just have an extra screen here in the editing suite and I can put it up there. All right. Next up, and no ties yet. This team has a whopping 6 SEC tournament titles.
Can I ask a question?
It depends on the question.
Are you going down? Like, is this the team that has the second most SEC tournament?
This is the team that has the second most SEC tournament titles. This is in order from most to least.
Okay.
Are you guys ready? Yep. Yeah. Go ahead. Show them. Steve Kirck is correct. It is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Still hasn't earned a full point, though, yet. He's only gotten 2 right. If he gets this next one right. This is actually 2 schools. They are tied at 4 SEC tournament titles. Remember, it is by most recent SEC tournament title. You must get these 2 in the correct order. Matt, I really hope you're not wasting a note card for each of these answers, because that is.
I am. So.
Oh my god!
I got a lot to blow. Okay. This is tough.
It is tougher than it looks. Because every other team is so close in terms of number of titles that you just have to kind of guess.
Like, I'm thinking when the most recent was, so I'll go with my gut here.
Give you guys about 5 more seconds.
2 teams in mind, and I got to go with it. This team has won it more recently, I believe.
Yeah. All right. So when you guys are ready, just put your hand up real quick. And Steve's up. Matt is up. Do you have a second one there, Steve?
Oh, we needed both?
Yeah, you needed both.
I have a feeling I'm wrong.
Matt, you are correct. You're wrong. Steve Kirck is correct, though. Florida and Tennessee. Matt, could you show me your card one more time, though? I want to give you
I had Tennessee and LSU.
Tennessee is the second one. Their last tournament title was 1979. Florida won it last in 2014. This next school, as Steve Kirck is going perfect, 4 for 4 so far, they have won 3 SEC tournament titles, and there's only 1 school.
I'm not right at this. I just got to stop trying.
You're going to try throughout because you have a chance to. The bonus is really sweet this week, and you don't have to get a certain number right to get the bonus.
Admittedly, if there's any Power 6 conference I know the least about, it's got to be the SEC and the Pac-12.
Well, I didn't. It's not my fault that I put that down because I didn't know you were coming on until like 2 hours ago. So when you guys,
I'll second that.
Yeah, when you guys are ready, just like put a finger up and let me know. All right. Which one am I looking at, Steve?
LSU.
Can you point to it?
LSU.
Well, both of you have picked LSU. Both of you are incorrect. The answer is actually Mississippi State. They have 3 SEC tournament titles. I realize now this is getting easier as we go along because there are only so many teams to pick now. Unfortunately for you guys, the next 4 teams are all tied with 2 SEC tournament titles. So you have to name 4 teams in the correct order. Matt looks like he's ready.
I got another question.
Okay, what's your other question?
Are all of these teams in the SEC currently?
Yes, we're going through the active SEC teams right now. The bonus involves you're getting to where the bonus is right now. Please don't worry about it this moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt is totally stalling right now.
I'm trying to, I can't think of the SEC teams off the top of my head. I had one in my mind, but I don't think it's right.
Well, there are only so many SEC teams left, so.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
The big thing is getting them in order. That's the tough part.
This one's gonna be tough to get in order.
Because there are 4 of them. Yeah.
I'll be impressed if I get even at least 3 of these.
Okay.
Right.
Jens, go ahead and show them. We will start with Steve. He has LSU, Auburn, South Carolina, and Mississippi. All 4 of those are incorrect in terms of their spots. Matt has Georgia, LSU, Arkansas, Ole Miss. All of those are also incorrect in terms of orders. Not in terms of the teams.
We're 0 for 8.
Not in terms of the teams, but the order. So the order goes Auburn for most recent in 2019. I'm kind of shocked you guys didn't get that, to be honest with you. Then Ole Miss in 2013, Vanderbilt in 2012, and Georgia back in 2008, harkening back to my starting 5. The next two schools are tied with one title apiece. One title apiece. Steve Kirck started out firing here, kind of like Kentucky against Morehead State, and then unfortunately, he's gone 0-4 since then. Sort of like Kentucky against every other team this year. Are you guys ready with these next two?
Mm-hmm.
All right, go ahead and show them. Unfortunately, both of you are incorrect yet again. LSU and Arkansas are the two schools, Matt. You just had to reverse them. Arkansas's last title in 2000, LSU's last title in 1980. The final three schools, we're not even, I don't even know if I really want to get into them. I'm just going to ask you to guess them in the order that I put them in on the sheet. The last three schools in the SEC are tied with 0 titles. So I can't go by the year that they won one because they haven't. But I will give you points if you put them in the correct spot that I have them in on the sheet. Didn't think that far ahead. Sorry, guys. Then you just got to hope that you can get the bonus right.
Again, it's sad that I don't know all the SEC teams off the top of my head.
It really is, considering you're the owner of the site. Like, all right, are you guys ready?
Yeah, I got 2 of them down. This is sad.
You only have 2?
Yeah.
Show your card.
I got Missouri and Texas A&M.
Well, surprisingly, Steve Kirck gets 1 point because Texas A&M was the 3rd on my sheet. Matt, show me your card again. You also get a point because Missouri was 1st on my sheet.
Here we go. I figured you might put Missouri first. That's like the only one I was.
It was also the order that they had them on the chart that I found. So as of right now, Steve has gotten 5 schools correct out of the 14. That gives him 1 point. Matt has 2 schools correct. That gives him 0 points. But like I said, there's a bonus today. Now, we've gone through regulation, but I said I sweetened up the deal today because I didn't think you guys would do this badly. But it was like, there's something here, that potential. So for gamesmanship's sake, there are 2 other teams that have played in an SEC tournament. One of them has won a title. Now, I will give you a bonus point for each of the 2 schools that you get correct. I will give you a bonus point for pointing out which one won the SEC title. And I will also give you a point for the year that title was won. So I need 2 schools that were in the SEC at one point. I need the school that won the one title, and I need the year that school won the title, and you could get up to 4 points.
How much time are you giving us here?
I'll give you a minute.
Am I allowed to look up like the conference?
No, you are not.
Like, can I get a list of teams? I'm not just going from head.
Sure. You want a list of teams? Well, considering that you're the owner of the site, it's any team that's played in the SEC.
You make it hard, Brendon. You make it harder than it needs to be.
This is the only way, man. It's the only way. Where's the fun in it if it's too easy? I will say, these schools it's not like they're a school like Missouri that's not in the Southeast. These schools are actually in a Southeastern state.
Okay.
And you know what? Just to make it a little easier, I will let each of you name 2 states to ask if they are in those states. And I will tell you yes or no.
Okay. I like this.
I'll start with Steve because he's the SEC aficionado.
I'm going to ask South Carolina.
The schools were not in South Carolina. Matt, what's your first choice?
Close off one of my 2 guesses.
Florida.
Neither of the schools are in Florida.
Wow. Okay.
Steve, your second guess.
I know one of them, so I'm not going to have a second guess.
Oh, okay. Matt, I'll let you get your second guess then.
Kentucky.
Neither of the schools are in Kentucky.
Okay.
Would you like to steal Steve's second guess?
Oh, you can't do that.
I want this to be competitive, and like I want to see if you guys can get it. Like, even if I narrow it down, I don't think he's gonna get it. That's how little respect I have for his trivia game right
The
now.
only other state would be Tennessee.
Neither of them are in Tennessee.
Okay. Wow.
And Steve says he knows one, and I think he's at least guessed another one.
So it's not in Florida, not in South Carolina, not in Kentucky,
And not in Tennessee. Neither of them are in any of those states.
Okay. I got one guess. And
remember, it's two schools. Which one won the title? What year? You can just give me your best guess for the year, because I don't know if either of you are going to get that right.
just thinking for my last guess here.
We'll figure it out, Matt. We're on a time crunch here. We still have the D block.
Yeah, I try to get it right. I try to get it right, but I don't think I'm going to. So I'm just gonna put a random one down here.
All right. Well, we're gonna go one at a time this time, and since I know Matt probably hasn't gotten anything right, go ahead and show us your card, Matt. We'll see how you did. Steve, leave yours down for a second.
I have Georgia Tech in 1959, and then I just went totally out there with UAB.
Well, Matt, I am very surprised because Georgia Tech is correct. They did win the title. It was not in 1959. So you do get 2 points, which gives you 1 point on the day. Congratulations. Matt Mlodzinski finishes with 1 point. All right, Steve, let me see your Jesus, I can't read that.
Georgia Tech, one title a long time ago. I didn't have a year.
Okay. Do you have a second school?
I picked Clemson, but obviously not being in South Carolina. That
All right. Well, Steve will also get 2 points based on the fact that he got the school correct. That puts him at 7, which gives him 2 points. The Georgia Tech won that SEC title in 1938.
Wow.
Which, yes, it
was
was
a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. Unfortunately, we needed an actual year for that. The other school, surprisingly, was the Green Wave from Tulane. They were in the SEC at one time. Obviously didn't win the title. That was our 3-point play. I'll add the points up over the course of the break. Well done, guys. Matt, you kind of redeemed yourself, I guess, by complete pulling something out of your butt. But hey, sometimes the best things happen to those who get lucky. Anyway, though, we will head to our final break of the day. Coming up next, we'll tease Monday's episode, and we'll also have stories to start your week stories to start your weekend, as well as picking the 3 tournament winners, even though we pretty much already did that throughout the entire episode. We'll be right back. It's the review. Back on the review, episode 19, closing up shop here on a Friday afternoon. Hope you're enjoying the episode wherever you're watching. This will be out at 6 p.m. tonight, Eastern time. At least I hope so, because I have a lot to do today. We're getting into stories to start your weekend. Both of our panelists, really all our writers, they're like Roz from Monsters Incorporated. She's like the slug lady that's sitting behind the card window, and she says, "I'm always watching, Mr. Wazowski. Always watching." I have a feeling Steve is always watching college basketball. I know Matt's only always watching Seton Hall stuff, so not sure if he is. But here are our panelist stories to start your weekend. Let's start with Steve and then go to Matt.
I'll go with 2, and my story is, what does Baylor do for their second game back from the pause? Struggled against Iowa State, who was at the bottom of the Big 12. Not surprisingly, had almost 3 weeks off and missed 5 or 6 games. They get Kansas on the road Saturday, at West Virginia, I believe, on Tuesday. So, they're going to need to play better in 2 tough environments, even though without fans, to stay undefeated. And I'm going to go on a limb and say that they're going to lose one of those 2.
Did you have another, sorry?
The second one is the Blue Bloods. I mean, Duke and Michigan State weren't on the bubble, weren't on the radar, weren't getting in, a week ago. Now they're playing well, got some key wins, and can they stay hot, get some key wins, and get themselves name called on Selection Sunday?
I'm going to go with the Atlantic 10 as my story to watch. I think in the first month of the season, Richmond got a lot of love. Then they started losing some games. St. Louis goes on that run. All of a sudden, St. Louis is the favorite to win the A10. St. Louis right now is out of the tournament. St. Bonaventure and VCU come on. And I think the A10 at the beginning of the year, I said it was better than the SEC. I'm taking that back. There's been a lot of freshmen in the SEC that have been able to elevate some of those teams up, namely LSU. Arkansas has definitely turned some heads as well. But I think the Atlantic 10 has been an interesting conference. I think, to me, St. Bonaventure and VCU are making it a two-bid league. And you've got St. Louis and what was the other team I mentioned? Richmond, that each have, if they finish strong, they could each get into the tournament as well. And even if they don't, they're going to be 1 or 2 seeds in the NIT. And I just think that goes to show that the Atlantic 10 is, I think people need to pay attention to it more yearly. It might not be a power conference, but every single year it's that 7th or 8th best conference in the country.
And I'll go ahead and give my obligatory Bellarmine story for the weekend. Their games against Liberty got canceled, guys. So I guess my story is what I'll be looking into over the weekend. Who's the number 1 seed in the ASUN tournament? Or is Bellarmine even going to be able to play in that because of the transition rule? That's all I got for that, though. I think Steve might have had something else before I cut him off. I'm sorry about that, by the way.
No, I just wanted to mention, I echo the A10 as a great conference because you didn't mention Davidson, you didn't mention UMass, and you didn't mention URI, and those are all quality programs and quality teams that can win games in March.
Well, we'll be talking about the A10 and the Atlantic Sun next Monday, along with a couple of other conference tournaments, depending on when they start, what date. I believe when I looked at it last night, it was the A10, ASUN, Ohio Valley, Missouri Valley is what we'll be covering on Monday. A lot of stories to talk about there, especially with Drake and Loyola and the MVC. Obviously, Matt just mentioned the Atlantic 10. So those are the tournaments we're going over on Monday for now, though. And even though we already did this earlier, just to reaffirm everyone's picks for winners on conference tournaments, gentlemen, your winner of the automatic bid from the Horizon League, we'll go Steve to Matt, and we'll keep on going that way.
I'll go with Wright State. They beat Cleveland State by 35 in one of their 2 matchups. If you beat them by 35, you're the better team. I'll go with Wright State out of the Horizon.
Sticking with Wright State as well. We obviously kind of previewed that earlier, and Wright State to me is a team that could even pull off maybe a first-round upset if they play a smaller team in the NCAAs.
How about the Big South?
I'll go with Winthrop. 17-1 for a reason. They're used to winning. They play at home. Winthrop gets it done.
Yeah, sticking with Winthrop as well. When you have a record that good, again, don't care about the competition that much. They're a quality basketball team.
And then finally, the America East.
I'm going to stick with my theme of going with teams that start towards the end of the alphabet, and I'll go with Vermont as the winner out of the America East. I think UMBC could win. I'd love to see the best of 3 decider in a championship game, but Vermont has the best player in the league, so I'll ride his coattails and Vermont gets in.
And I'll copy you 3 for 3. If I'm picking against Vermont, I'm picking against Matty Brackets, and that wouldn't make too much sense.
So full of himself. Anyway, guys, that's all we have today for episode 19 of the review. Stick with us on Monday and really throughout the next couple of weeks as we're going to be previewing every single conference tournament. Is it going to be hard for some? Absolutely. Is it going to be enjoyable? If you're a fan of the team from like the SWAC, then yeah, it will be. Until next Monday, though, for Steve Kirck, Mat Mlodzinski, I'm Brendon Hodges. This has been The Review. Take care. Have a great weekend. Watch some college hoops. We'll see you Monday.